This interview is with Mr. Chauncey Scott of 713 Westwood in Shawnee. He came to Oklahoma in 1905.
Most of that motel is now. When you go off the bluff down there and then go to the right, go, right on this side of the bridge,
Yeah.
they have a trailer court in there.
Uh-huh.
And she lived up above, overlooked it. Probably sneered at a little bit. No, it wasn't there then. I was just kidding about it. And she can answer those better than I could. I came here in 1905 or 6 and I went through high school here. And I lived right over there by the high school on Broadway. And then I left. And that was in 1913.
Yeah.
That was some time ago. But she's better able to answer all of those questions than I am. But I think, are you supposed to walk in and get tape interviews on all these things?
Yeah.
Impromptu?
Sorta. It's not, it doesn't have to be, they don't expect, real good recording and all that stuff. It doesn't have to be edited or anything. It's just,
Tell some history, that's all.
Well, she can tell you a much more interesting story than I can on
it. If you think, we could come back later, there's no hurry on it. We can,
I know she hasn't fit to do it this afternoon. She had an awful night. I don't know. When she talked to me, after you called, I thought you were. She seemed to think you want to get a summary of the usual things people talk about, and the changes in them. And I thought she meant it would be something like our present setup of society and the schools, and that hasn't changed basically. There's about 7 things that are covered in all those write-ups. If I thought you were going to write something.
Yeah.
Well, that's been established in a long time. The first one is health. And the next one, that means doctors, hospitals, and how they operated then compared to the way they do now with all of this fancy things.
Yeah.
And the next one is the wealth, which means what people did in the process of earning a living here. What businesses were they in and how they worked. And then, of course, in the early days, it would be farming and raising crops, mostly. All the things to eat and working at all the trades. It was necessary to keep the, what they call economy going here. And the raising of all those products and the raising of all the animals, each one of them had its own division, like horses need shoeing, cattle needed feeding, and they all needed food, so they raised hay and so forth for the cattle and the horses and the sheep, whatever they had. And there was horse shoeing shops for the horses, and veterinarians for all of them, all the animals. And all the things were sold through small retail stores. Now they're big chains. And I thought that was what, from what Hadley had said, that you wanted. But briefly, to give you a whole rundown on it, the 7 things are health, because that's man's prime interest. And wealth is the next one. That's all the things he does to earn a living. And then, of course, there's knowledge, and that's the school system and the training of all the youngsters in the community. What kind of school system was used. And a lot of debate about that, whether the one they had did anything or not. But anyway, it was a start. The transportation system, of course, was part of all of those things. How did people move around?
Would you say you came to Oklahoma in 1905?
Pardon?
So you came to Oklahoma in 1905?
Yeah.
How did you come here then?
Well, the railroads were here when we came down, and we moved down here from Ohio first and Indiana. And the way people moved in down to this new country, see, there wasn't any highways or dirt roads, and you could get in a covered wagon and come down if you wanted to come that way. But after the railroads came in, you rented a boxcar and pile everything in it, the horse and the cow and the pets and all your furniture and everything else, and left, say, Nicetown, Indiana, where we moved to from here. And the railroad picked up the car and brought it down and parked it over here on the Santa Fe. Then you hired a drayman around Shawnee to unload it and take it to its destination. And of course was all handwork and so forth.
Did you just buy a house when you get down there, or did y'all build a house?
No, we didn't build one. We bought one over on Broadway, which was in the middle of the block there on the 500 block on Broadway. There was one house on it, 2-story frame house, and the frontage was 150 feet, and it began about 150 feet from the corner of Highland and Broadway.
Did y'all use wood stoves?
And it was a great big lot, 183 feet deep. which is a pretty sizable place. There's about a fourth of that frontage on that block. And I remember it well because my job was to try to keep it mowed. I'd start at one corner one time, and before I got to the other side of the first corner, it's all grown up again. So it was just round robin with a mower and a sickle. You asked me something about
Yeah, how did you heat the house? Or did you just have wood stoves?
it was just wood stoves. Nearly everybody then, there wasn't much steam heat then. If you had a house heated with steam, you were in the lace stocking group, the utterly utter people.
Mm-hmm.
There were not many of them, and they mostly used just these wood metal stoves, wood burners, or coal burners. They'd burn either one. We had one in our front room, and we had one in the dining room, and then of course the kitchen had a stove, thank goodness. And then up in this center, up through where the heat from these went, there's a closet there, and we had one of these big drums, which is nothing but a big steel tub where the heat went in, and it was supposed to heat the whole upstairs. On a real cold night, it did a very poor job. But that was the way many houses, two-story houses were built here, and everybody loaded those big the stoves, just wood-burning, coal-burning stoves downstairs with coal, usually at night, and packed them so they wouldn't go out. Closed them up so the coal would stay hot in there, in them through the night, and in the morning you just stirred them up, the flames came up, and the heat went up and out into the rooms and upstairs. Pretty generally, the bulk of the houses were only one story. So that's the type of house of coal burning stove that was here.
Did you do anything to cool the houses, or did you just open the windows and let the...
There was no cooling system invented then. We used fans. There were small electric fans that were used to cool off a room.
Did you have any kind of entertainment then, to get out and have any fun or anything? Or did you have much time for that?
Well, that's all everybody had was time. Everybody, you mean what boys and girls did during the days then?
Yeah, what anybody did, just what they... When you want to have a little fun, what did you do?
Well, there wasn't a whole lot of organized play like there is now.
Yeah.
But there was no, I don't remember of seeing any tennis courts, although one was started, I think, in town somewhere, I forget where. And of course they had scrub baseball and scrub football, and riding horseback. If the family owned a horse that would ride, or that the children could ride, that was one of the things. And there wasn't much else basically to do in play all these fancy bridge. Didn't have all these fancy bridge clubs. To my knowledge, they may have had them, but I never played. And most of them. And there's fishing around here then, and swimming. And the swimming wasn't too good. The river wasn't as dirty then as it is now, because it was more or less new. And but it wasn't fit to swim in, but we all did.
Were there doctors in town, or was there just one doctor or more than one?
Oh yes, the doctors, of course, lived in town. They had offices down around Main Street, most of them, and they all had horses and buggies, and they had either kept them where they lived or kept them in the livery stable downtown, the more wealthy doctor. And if they get a call to go out to northwest of town, they would take their horse and buggy and drive out there and do whatever is necessary or whatever they knew to do. They all carried they had a kit, a little satchel, had all these pills in it. And they'd make their diagnosis and then pick out the pills out of the kit that they thought would be right for them, and all the ones they had, they'd pick out the ones they had that they thought would help, and leave instructions with the family what to do with. And then they'd call back in case of serious illness that could the next day to see if there's any emergency. They'd have to, and they did have at that time they had a hospital over on Center Street. It's being torn down now, I think. And then, if anyone was needed hospitalization, they'd take them over there. I don't know how they got them there. They're in a buggy or a wagon or whatever, what have you.
Yeah.
And it was, well, the old building's still over there. Now, with present standards, it was a pretty crude place. And not very comfortable. I had typhoid fever. I went over there. And it wasn't near as of course, it wasn't as near as nice as the medical center out here now. I got through it, so I'm kind of grateful that the place was there.
Yeah. The help anyway.
Yeah.
Well, if you think Miss Scott would feel better later on in the week, we can come back and talk to her a little later.
Roy, do you have a copy of that?
Well, we can just leave this one here.
Can you
Yeah,
leave
I've got
that?
another. I've got a copy.
Yeah, we can.
You know, it's pretty hard to give you.
Yeah, no, we understand that.
Was what I said is something like what
Oh, sure. Oh, that was a great help.
what you want to get?
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly what we wanted, what you told us.
Pardon me?
That's exactly what we were wanting, what you just told us about the
Oh, it is?
Yes, and the way you heated the houses and just the
Uh-huh.
way you lived back then.
Well, over there too, Dad liked horses. We shipped our horses from, was born in Ohio, like we were down here in that boxcar. And he built a house, a barn back on the back end of the lot. It looked somewhat like a house. Weatherboarding like on most of these houses built at that time. They're kind of a board that wide that has two parts.
Yeah.
And this two-story barn, and he got a little fancy. The upstairs had a floor just like these wooden houses have, and gables, and it was up about a foot and a half off the ground. The support foundation were these cement blocks, like they're used now around. They were all right till we had a heavy rain and they would sink a little bit, and then you'd have to have a repairman in.
Did y'all raise horses?
No, not here. That was a kind of a family horse.
Oh.
Dad always said that he knew more than we did. We always accused him of thinking more of the horse than he did of us. He jealousy started early. But I always took care of him after so long a time, currying, and he was quite a fast racehorse. I used to take him hitched to the buggy and go down to the racetrack down. It was on the right down the bottom there, not too far from the river bridge there now, and I could warm him up out there hitched to a four-wheel buggy, and I could make him. I've got Danny. Dan thought more of the horse than he did of me, and he just raised it. I said, well, those men all down there think he's a wonderful horse, and after I told him then, it was all right. He was a good horse. We took him. We moved from here out to near Clovis, New Mexico, and Farmville, Texas, and we shipped him out there, and then when we left there, we came back here for a while. Then my dad and mother moved back to Ohio, and we shipped him back there. Turned him out to pasture. He had a pretty good life back there.
Now Steve's dad raises horses out there. He lives out on a little ranch out there west of town. His dad raises horses out there.
We're here?
Mm-hmm.
What's your last name?
Duval.
What?
Duval, D-U-V-A-L.
Oh yeah, I know. I didn't know Duval's here. But they spread all over the country. Big rubber company there in Akron or somewhere there. Made early buggy tires and everything else. Duval Rubber Company. It's still a branch of one of the bigger companies now.
What did you get your first job at? What did you do when you first got your job? What kind of a business did you go into?
Oh, I was like all you youngsters then. I didn't know what the heck to do. I don't think most people's parents didn't know what to do. And I went through high school. I went from the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th grade. Then I went to Jefferson School up here, the 7 and 8. Then went to high school, which was down in Woodland Park, there where on the building down right at the head of 9th Street. I think it's junior high school, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's not there. They tore all those old buildings down. They're all built pretty much alike. They had rooms around the outside, and then the well in the middle where the stairways were. And that's about all it was. Two of them running up and down stairs. And of course, most of them all had their sanitary facilities in a chick sale out in the yard. Then, which was caused a lot of humor and kidding.
Yeah.
Well, when they built that old new house, high school, it's over there now, where the one on the island is, and they had inside plumbing, running water and so forth. We thought we were in luxury.
Yeah.
But we were like all other children. I wondered what I would do when I got out of high school. And they had one principal over there that took an interest in me, and he first talked me into going to college and getting ready to go to college, right grades to get in and so forth, just like they do to all you boys now. And I didn't know anything about it till after my graduation time. I went to Dad about a month before graduation, or 6 weeks, and told him that the principal over at high school talked about me going to college, and I'd like to go if there's any way to do it. And he asked me a few questions, and then he talked to the mother, and pretty soon, where do you want to go to school? And I said, well, he recommended the University of Chicago, and he didn't want me fooling around Shawnee with nothing to do, and so I think he didn't know anything any better to say. He said, well, you'd better get ready and go. So I went back over and I wrote letters in like your principal wrote into your college down there, and pretty soon I was all set to go with a pair of peg-top trousers and a celluloid collar. It was horrible to wear. Lots of people used them then.
Did your mother make most of your clothes, or did you buy them out of the store downtown?
Oh, my mother never made we always bought them downtown. My tailor here, I bought mine from a local tailor here. He bought, and they were Society brand, Bud Light, right after March now. And find the nearest size suit to one you ordered and made up as far as they could in mass production, and alter it and send it back as all brand new. Same system. It wasn't just exactly like that. Now, of course, they make these things up in real big mass production. The operations aren't the suit cloth isn't hand cut, they're all cut by machinery. And they're shipped out here and put in these retail stores and placed on exhibition. But there was no such thing as then you got one suit and probably an extra pair of trousers a year, and if you're lucky.
Yeah.
And most of us wore a blue shirt. Like we called them a railroad band shirt. They were 50 cents a piece. Just kind of a bluish shirt. I see them around town still. Not the same one, because the same one now is about $4.
Yeah.
And then, I'm speaking myself now, not everybody. You'd have white shirts, with collars on. But stiff collars came in to the picture then because somebody found they could buy a shirt and put a detachable collar on it and wear the shirt 3 weeks longer if you had a collar like that.
Yeah.
Without having it laundered. That's all he used to say. And of course that's an exaggeration. Then of course a lot of them were no doubt worn that long. If you had one tie, or if you had one tie, you were dressed up. If you had two ties, you were a fashion model. But now system's different. You go down and buy a suit, then you have to have a pair of slacks, and then you have to have a shirt to match, and then 2 or 3 ties to match, and socks to match, and you really use up a lot of clothes if you can afford to pay for them or buy them. And personally, I like the old system. I only had one tie. I always knew where it was. I didn't know how to tie it. It's the problem for me now to get these new ones tied. Yeah. They're heavily padded and make big lumps.
What year? When did you get your first car? When did you get a car?
For what?
Just to drive, just a car. When did you have your first car of your own?
First car?
Yeah.
Oh, it's pretty hard to tell. Of my own?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I went to school in Chicago, and after the World War I was over, I went there to go to work. And first year of the summer, I was down in Boston at the school, company school. I didn't need a car there. I couldn't afford one anyway. In those days, a $500 Ford was it was something to accumulate $500 unless somebody gave it to you. I never ran into many of those people that were passing out the $500. And I went back to, when I got through with school, I was sent to Denver and to go to work in the office there. And that was about 19, and see, I'm losing my mind. And I was there for about a year and a half, and then I had the job of managing a place then. The territory included Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, New Mexico. But most of everything outside of Denver was a good-sized deal. And when there was one up, I went up and covered it and got the information and drew it up and sent it in to get blueprints and so forth from, like in public libraries. I'd send it in when they had 2 or 3 men at the factory, and one in New York City that blueprinted all the stuff, what went in it, and how the book stacks were constructed and all that. Of course, that necessitated me getting blueprints from the architects that were building a building. I always sent those along in the interest of accuracy and keeping me out of trouble. So that's pretty much Well, after I got to, after the first year and a half, well, the first year and a half in Denver, I worked downtown. Denver was a city of about 250,000 then. It's close to 1 million now, or more. And of course that whole territory's grown tremendously. And then as Denver grew out, I got a car to cover the area. They had a streetcar system. I used it at first. The old hospitals and institutions were along the streetcar lines, and they weren't very far out.
Yeah.
And that was about all there was to it. And then, of course, as time went along, everybody had to have a car to hold a job. And then I worked there for about 1927, and I went back to Chicago. And I worked down the loop then. I didn't need a car. The business was downtown in an area about 8 blocks square. And most of my business came out of 2 buildings on LaSalle Street. And I sold more big stuff in those 2 buildings, or half of those 2 buildings. Then we sold an old Rocky Mountain region. The office would sell out there. But I didn't need a car. I didn't want one because cars were more or less a nuisance in the developing traffic. And of course, as time went on, business grew big there, and we moved out to Glenview in the suburb, about like the estates, lake estates out here. And that's 18 miles northwest of downtown. And by that time, all the business in Chicago and factories had been moved from downtown main offices to the factories around Ford, Dodge Chicago, McDonnell Douglas, and so forth. They were all pretty much on one street. The street ran into Glenview. That's the reason I moved out there. I get up in the morning, drive down that street. I only had about 6 customers. That's all I could cover. And of course, then you had to have cars. Then Ma got rich in, she had to have Cadillacs. So I had to work hard.
Yeah.
We're getting clear away from Shawnee, though.
Yeah. Well, that covered everything pretty
Then
well.
after I got through working, she got through working, we came back here. Never intended to stay here, but here we are. About 12 years ago. But a lot of people did that. And this is kind of a sketchy, just talk as we go along.
Yeah.
You kind of miss all the important things unless you have a description of a lot of these things. Take the Chamber of Commerce down here, they put out a book about early Shawnee, and they have pictures in it illustrating everything. All they change is the old schools and so forth compared to now. They may be around here somewhere, and if you wanted to, would you supposed to attach any pictures to this write-up?
I'm not sure. Did he mention
Just the tapes. All it is.
Just a tape?
Well,
And then the growth of all these schools made a big, colleges made a big change here. Do you have any, did they ask you anything about the colleges? Or
they just asked us about the educational system, you know, just in general. They didn't single out the colleges or anything.
Well, then we'd cover a book about that, take it.
Yeah.
But, you know, coming in like this, Adelaide can tell you a lot of interesting things there because about the old school system, because they expelled her a couple of times.
Well, I'll tell you what, you can let her read over this and then we'll come back and